I'm sitting in my car outside the station, and I can hear the engine ticking as it cools. The sound is small and rhythmic, like a clock winding down. I've been here for 20 minutes now, maybe longer. I don't really know anymore. Time feels strange tonight, thick and slow, like I'm moving through something heavier than air. The envelope is still in the passenger seat. I haven't touched it since I set it down. It's just sitting there, slightly yellowed at the edges, the handwriting unmistakable even from where I'm sitting. My name written in that looping, confident script I used to see on notes slipped under my dorm room door. Nathaniel. Not Nate. Never Nate. Julian always used my full name, like he was the only person who knew what it really meant. I haven't seen that handwriting in 20 years. The station is mostly empty now. A few commuters are trickling out, heads down, moving toward their cars with the tired efficiency of people who make this trip every day. The streetlights are starting to flicker on, casting everything in that pale, in-between glow that belongs to dusk. The world feels suspended somehow, like it's holding its breath, like it's waiting for me to decide what happens next. The train is due in 10 minutes. I still don't know if I'm going inside. I pick up the envelope again, just to feel the weight of it. It's lighter than I expected, just a single page folded inside. I've already read it 3 times today, but I open it again anyway, like maybe the words will have changed. They haven't. The message is still short, still impossible to ignore. I'm coming back through town. I thought maybe we could finally talk. That's all it says. No explanation. No context. Just those 2 sentences and his name signed at the bottom. Julian Hart. Even his signature looks the same. Quick, slanted, like he was already halfway out the door when he wrote it. I fold the letter again, creasing it along the same lines until the paper softens between my fingers. My hands are shaking a little. I tell myself it's just the cold, but I know that's not true. It's April. The air is mild. I'm shaking because I know what this letter means. I'm shaking because I've been avoiding this conversation for 2 decades, and now it's found me anyway. I look at myself in the rearview mirror. The face staring back is older than I remember, lines around the eyes, gray starting to thread through the temples. I'm 44 now, married, 2 kids, a mortgage, a job that pays well enough to keep everyone comfortable, a life built carefully, methodically, around all the things I'm supposed to want. But underneath all of it, there's still that small, unyielding pulse. That thing I've never been able to name. That feeling that's been sitting in my chest since I was 22 years old, waiting for me to finally turn around and look at it. The train whistle sounds in the distance, low and mournful. I close my eyes. And just like that, I'm back there. 20 years dissolve in an instant. A dorm room. Late autumn. The desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Julian sitting cross-legged on the floor, laughing at something I said, his head tilted back, his eyes bright with that restless energy he always carried. I remember the way the light caught his face. I remember thinking, just for a second, that I wanted to reach out and touch him. Not in any way I could explain. Just touch him. Just to know if he was real. And then the moment passed. And I never said anything. And we graduated, and he left, and I stayed. And I built this whole life pretending I'd never felt it at all. I open my eyes. The station is still there. The train is pulling in now, brakes hissing, people moving toward the platform. I can see them through the glass doors, just shadows and shapes in the fluorescent light. I don't move. My phone buzzes in my pocket. Probably Elaine, asking when I'll be home. I don't check it. I just sit there, staring at the envelope, at the station, at the version of myself I've been running from for half my life. The train doors open. People step off. And somewhere in that crowd, Julian is walking toward the exit, looking for me, wondering if I'll show. I take a breath. My hand is on the door handle. I still don't know if I'm going inside. I didn't go inside that night. I sat in the car until the platform emptied, until the train pulled away again, until there was no one left to meet. Then I drove home with the envelope still on the passenger seat, Julian's words burning a hole through the silence. When I got back, Elaine was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. She looked up and smiled, asked if everything was okay. I told her it was fine. Just a long day. She didn't push. She never does. That's one of the things I've always appreciated about her. The way she gives me space, even when maybe she shouldn't. I'm 44 years old now. Nathaniel Carver. Husband. Father. Corporate attorney. I live in a quiet suburb outside Boston, in a house with white trim and a maple tree in the front yard. The kind of place where people know their neighbors' names and kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. It's modest, comfortable, carefully maintained. The lawn is always mowed. The gutters are always clean. Everything in its place. My days follow a rhythm I could navigate blind. Breakfast at 7. Usually just coffee and toast while Elaine packs lunches for the boys. Commute by 8. The same route every morning, the same exit off the highway. Meetings until 5, sometimes later. Home by 6:30 if traffic cooperates. Dinner around 7. Help with homework. A glass of wine in the study while Elaine watches something on television in the other room. It's a good life. A safe life. The kind of life people spend years working toward. And it feels like I'm living it from the outside. Elaine and I met in law school. She was 2 years behind me, sharp and determined, the kind of person who color codes her notes and never misses a deadline. We started dating during her second year. It felt natural, uncomplicated. She made me laugh. She didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. When I proposed, it felt like the logical next step. When we got married, everyone said we made sense together. And we do. We make sense. We're kind to each other. We raise our boys with intention and care. We have a mortgage and a retirement plan and family dinners on Sundays. We share a bed every night. Our routines syncing like clockwork. Who turns off the lights? Who sets the alarm? Who gets up first when one of the kids calls out in the dark? But there's a distance between us that neither of us talks about. A space I can't quite explain. She reaches for me sometimes, in the quiet moments, and I respond the way I'm supposed to. But even then, even in the intimacy we share, there's a part of me that's somewhere else. A part of me that's always been somewhere else. She knows. I think she's always known. She's too perceptive not to. But she's never pushed me to name it. Maybe because she's afraid of what I might say. Maybe because I'm afraid too. In the evenings, after everyone's gone to bed, I sit in my study surrounded by the remnants of a life I used to live. Old books with cracked spines and margin notes in faded ink. Framed diplomas on the wall. A box of college memorabilia I've never had the heart to throw away. Concert ticket stubs. Mixtapes I don't have a player for anymore. Photographs I never put on display. There's one photo in particular that I keep at the bottom of the box. 2 young men in a cramped dorm room, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning like they know something the rest of the world doesn't. We're both drunk, I think. It was someone's birthday. Julian's hair is longer than he wears it now, falling into his eyes. My face is younger, unguarded in a way I don't recognize anymore. I don't look at it often, but I know exactly where it is. Julian Hart. Even now, just thinking his name feels like touching something I'm not supposed to. Like reaching for a flame and hoping it won't burn. We met freshman year. He lived 3 doors down from me in the east wing of Morrison Hall. I heard him before I saw him, his voice carrying through the hallway late at night, arguing with someone about Coltrane versus Miles Davis like it was a matter of life and death. When I finally met him at some floor mixer, he was exactly what I expected. Confident, restless, the kind of person who fills a room just by walking into it. He played piano, jazz, mostly, but he'd experiment with anything. Classical, blues, strange atonal pieces he'd compose at 3 in the morning when he couldn't sleep. I'd hear him sometimes through the walls, those cascading runs of notes that sounded like questions without answers. We became friends the way college friends do. Quickly, intensely, without much thought. Late-night conversations about things that felt urgent and important. Studying together in the library until they kicked us out. Driving nowhere in his beat-up Honda with the windows down and the music too loud. He'd fall asleep mid-sentence sometimes, a book open across his chest, and I'd sit there in the quiet just watching him breathe. He was warmth, energy, the kind of person who made you feel like the world was bigger and stranger and more interesting than you'd ever imagined. I was the opposite, careful, controlled, the kind of person who planned things 3 steps ahead. He used to joke that I was the only person he knew who made lists for their lists. He'd steal my planner sometimes, just to see me panic. Together, we made sense in a way I couldn't explain. Like we were two halves of something that worked better combined. And underneath it all, there was something else. Something neither of us named. A tension that hummed in the spaces between words. The way his hand would brush against mine when we walked. The way he'd look at me sometimes, like he was trying to solve a puzzle I didn't know I was hiding. I told myself it was just friendship. Just the intensity of being young and close and figuring out who you were. But there were moments I've replayed 1,000 times since, where I knew it was more than that. The night we drove to the coast and sat on the hood of his car watching the sunrise, and he said he didn't want anything to change. The afternoon in his dorm room when he asked me what I was afraid of, and I couldn't answer because the truth was sitting right there between us. The night he brushed his hand against the back of my neck, and I flinched, and he pulled away so fast it was like he'd been burned. We never talked about it. We just kept circling it, year after year, pretending we didn't know what we were dancing around. And then graduation came. Julian got an offer to play with a small ensemble in New York. He packed up his life in 3 days and left without looking back. I stayed, went to law school, buried myself in briefs and case law and 100-hour weeks. Met Elaine, got married, built this careful, ordered life where nothing was left to chance. I convinced myself I'd made the right choice. That what I felt back then was just confusion, the intensity of youth, the kind of thing everyone experiences and then grows out of. But then, last week, the letter arrived. Postmarked from Brooklyn. Handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. And the moment I saw it, I knew. I'd been lying to myself for 20 years. I still am. The letter sits on my desk for 3 days before I touch it again. I keep telling myself I won't respond. That I'll let it fade into the background noise of my life, the way I've let so many other things fade. But I can't stop thinking about it. About him. About the fact that he's here, so close, after all this time. Julian writes that he's taken a short teaching residency at the Music Conservatory, 2 weeks, maybe more, working with graduate students on some kind of performance intensive. He's staying in faculty housing near campus. He mentions it casually, like it's nothing. Like 20 years of silence can be bridged with coffee and small talk. He suggests we meet. Nothing formal. Just a chance to catch up. I tell myself I'm not going to reply. I rehearse all the reasons why it's a bad idea. Why opening that door again would be reckless, dangerous, unfair to everyone involved. But then I find myself typing out a response. Something brief and non-committal. Sure, coffee sounds good. Let me know when you're free. I delete it. Write it again. Delete it again. Finally, I just hit send before I can talk myself out of it. His response comes within an hour. A cafe name. A time. Saturday afternoon. I spend the next 2 days in a state I can barely describe. Part anticipation, part dread. I keep checking my phone, wondering if he'll cancel. Hoping he will. Hoping he won't. Saturday comes. I tell Elaine I have some work to catch up on at the office. She accepts it without question. The boys are at soccer practice. The house is quiet as I leave. The cafe is one of those places near campus that tries too hard to be authentic. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, indie music playing just a little too loud. I get there early, order something I don't want, and sit by the window where I can watch the door. And then he walks in. For a second, I forget how to breathe. He looks older, yes. His hair is streaked with gray now, cut shorter than he used to wear it. There are lines around his eyes, a weariness in his posture that wasn't there before. But he's still unmistakably Julian. The same restless energy. The same blue eyes that always seem to see more than they should. He spots me and smiles. It's a careful smile, tentative, like he's not sure what kind of reception he'll get. He walks over, and I stand. And for a moment we just look at each other. Then he pulls me into a hug. Quick, almost awkward, and I feel the years collapse between us. We sit. Order more coffee neither of us needs. The conversation starts the way these things always do. Surface level. Safe. He tells me about New York. The years he spent playing session work, teaching private lessons, scraping by in a studio apartment in Brooklyn. He talks about the students he's working with now, how talented they are, how hungry. I tell him about the firm, about the cases I work on, about the house in the suburbs. We talk about mutual friends from college, the ones who stayed in touch and the ones who disappeared. It's all very polite, very careful, but underneath every word is something else. An awareness, a current running between us that neither of us acknowledges, but both of us feel. He asks about my family. I tell him about Elaine, about the boys. Michael is 15 now, plays lacrosse, wants to study engineering. David is 13, quieter, still figuring himself out. Julian listens with genuine interest, asks follow-up questions, says all the right things. Then he mentions, almost as an afterthought, that he never married. Didn't feel right, he says. His voice is light, but there's something underneath it. Something weighted. He looks at me when he says it. Not long. Just a glance. But I feel it in my chest like a hand pressing against my sternum. I don't know how to respond, so I just nod. Take a sip of coffee that's gone cold. We talk for another hour. The conversation gets easier as we go, the old rhythms returning. He still argues about music like it's a matter of moral importance. I still play devil's advocate just to watch him get worked up. At some point, we're both laughing, and it feels like no time has passed at all. But then he checks his watch and says he should get going. He has a meeting with one of his students. We stand, promise to do this again before he leaves town. The hug goodbye lasts a second longer than the first one. As I watch him walk away, I feel something crack open inside me. Something I've kept sealed for so long, I'd almost convinced myself it wasn't there anymore. That night, I lie in bed next to Elaine, staring at the ceiling. She's asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. The clock on the nightstand says it's past midnight. I should be tired, but all I can think about is the way Julian looked at me across that table. The way his voice sounded when he said he never married. The weight of everything we didn't say. I close my eyes and I'm 22 again. In his dorm room. Late at night. The desk lamp casting long shadows. Julian sitting cross-legged on the floor with his guitar, playing something soft and meandering. Me pretending to study while really just watching him. The moment when he looked up and caught me staring, and instead of looking away, he just smiled. The memory is so vivid it hurts. 3 days later, he texts me. His students are giving a final recital Friday night. Nothing fancy, just a showcase of what they've been working on. He asks if I'd like to come. Bring your family if you want, he says. But even through the screen, I can feel what he's really asking. I tell Elaine about it. She says she has plans with her book club, but I should go. It'll be good for me to get out, she says. Reconnect with old friends. I wonder if she knows. If some part of her understands exactly what she's giving me permission to do. Friday comes. I drive to campus alone. The recital is in one of the old performance halls, the kind with velvet seats and acoustic paneling and the faint smell of wood polish. It's maybe half full. Students, parents, a few faculty members scattered throughout. I sit near the back. The lights dim, and then Julian walks out onto the stage. He doesn't perform himself. He's there to introduce his students, to conduct, to guide. But watching him up there, I feel something uncoil inside me. Something that's been wound tight for so long I'd forgotten it was there. The music is beautiful. Complex pieces I don't have the vocabulary to describe, but I'm barely listening to the notes. I'm watching Julian. The way he moves. The way he shapes the air with his hands. The way he closes his eyes during the quiet passages like he's listening to something the rest of US can't hear. When it's over, there's applause. People stand. Students hug him, thank him. I wait until the crowd thins, then make my way down to the stage. He sees me coming, and his whole face changes. There's something raw in his expression. Something unguarded. We don't say much. Just congratulations. Just thank you for coming. But the air between us feels electric. He asks if I want to take a walk. The campus is quiet this time of night. We end up following the old paths we used to take, past the library, through the quad, under the oak trees that line the main green. Everything is familiar and strange at once. The buildings are the same, but we're different. Older. Carrying more weight. We talk about nothing and everything. He tells me about a piece he's been composing. I tell him about a case I'm working on that's driving me crazy. It's easy. Comfortable. Like slipping into old clothes that still fit. And then we stop. Under one of those oak trees. The one we used to sit under between classes. Eating cheap pizza and arguing about things that don't matter. Julian turns to face me. The streetlight catches his profile. He looks tired, sad, beautiful. He says, "I waited a long time to see you again." His voice is quiet, almost a whisper. I don't respond. I can't. My throat is closed up. My heart is hammering so hard I'm sure he can hear it. He doesn't push. He just stands there, looking at me with those same blue eyes that used to undo me, that still do. The silence stretches between us. But this time, it doesn't feel empty. It feels full, heavy with everything we've never said. Everything we've spent 20 years pretending didn't exist. I open my mouth, close it, try again. But the words won't come. So we just stand there, under the oak tree, in the dark, while the whole weight of the past presses down on us like something physical. And I realize, with a clarity that terrifies me, that I'm not ready for this to end. After that night under the oak tree, something shifts. A boundary has been crossed that neither of us can pretend doesn't exist anymore. We start meeting more often. At first, I tell myself it's innocent. Just old friends catching up, making up for lost time. But I know that's not what this is. I've known from the beginning. We meet for lunch between his teaching sessions. Take long drives out to the coast with no particular destination in mind. Sit in diners drinking bad coffee and talking until the servers start giving us looks. Every encounter feels stolen, precious, like something that could disappear if I hold it too tightly. Julian is easy in his skin in a way I've never been. He talks openly about the life he's lived, the men he's loved and lost. He tells me about Daniel, who he dated for 3 years in his 30s. About Marcus, who broke his heart so thoroughly he didn't play music for 6 months. About the quiet man named Sam, who he almost married before realizing they wanted different futures. He talks about these things without shame or hesitation. Just facts. Just pieces of a life fully lived. And I listen, fascinated and envious in equal measure. Envious of his freedom, his honesty, the way he's never had to hide who he is or what he wants. I start to realize how much of my own life has been about avoidance. How much of myself I've left unexplored. All the questions I never asked. All the doors I never opened. I built a life around what was expected, what was safe, what wouldn't force me to examine too closely the things I was afraid to see. And now here's Julian, sitting across from me in a booth at some roadside diner, telling me about the time he sang backup vocals for a jazz singer in Berlin, and all I can think is how much of the world I've missed. How small I've made myself. One evening, he invites me to his apartment. The faculty housing is modest, a 1-bedroom in an old building near campus, the kind of place with radiator heat and hardwood floors that creak. It's cluttered in the way artists' spaces always are. Sheet music scattered across surfaces. Books stacked in precarious towers. A keyboard set up by the window. He pours us wine. We sit on the small balcony overlooking the street, watching the evening settle over the town. The city hums softly below us. Cars passing, voices drifting up from the sidewalk. The air smells like spring rain and something flowering I can't name. We're quiet for a while, just sitting. It's comfortable in a way that feels dangerous. Then Julian puts on an album. Vinyl, because of course he still has a turntable. The sound fills the apartment, warm, crackling, immediate. And I recognize it instantly. It's the same record we used to listen to in college. Late nights in his dorm room. The volume low so we wouldn't wake the neighbors. The two of us sprawled on the floor, passing a bottle of cheap wine back and forth, convinced we were having profound conversations about art and meaning and what we wanted our lives to become. The music washes over me, and I feel the years collapse again. All the distance I've tried to create, all the carefully constructed walls, they dissolve like they were never there at all. I close my eyes and I'm back there, 22 years old. Lying on the floor of his dorm room at 2 in the morning. Julian next to me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the almost touching, the way he'd shift and his shoulder would brush against mine and neither of us would move away. I remember the night he reached over, his hand moving like he was going to touch my face, his fingers just barely grazing my neck. And then he stopped, pulled back, like he'd crossed some invisible line he hadn't meant to cross. We never talked about it. We just kept pretending. I open my eyes. Julian is watching me. His expression is unreadable. Did you ever think about it? He asks. His voice is quiet. Careful. I know exactly what he means. But I can't make myself answer. My throat feels too tight. My heart is pounding. He nods slowly, like my silence is answer enough. Then he says, I did. Every day for a long time. The admission hangs in the air between us. Heavy. Irrevocable. I stare at my wine glass. At the city lights below. At anything except him. He keeps talking. His voice is soft now, almost painful to hear. He tells me about graduation day. How he stood outside Morrison Hall with all his boxes packed, waiting for me to come say goodbye. How he'd convinced himself that maybe, if we had one more conversation, one more moment, I'd finally say something. That I'd give him a reason to stay. But I never came. I was already gone. Already running. He tells me he spent years wondering if he'd imagined it. The tension. The looks. The moments that felt too charged to be just friendship. He tells me he dated other people trying to forget. That he moved to New York and threw himself into music and tried to build a life that didn't have a hole in it shaped like me. He says, I told myself I was over it. That it was just some college thing. But then I saw your name in an article about some case your firm won, and I spent the entire day thinking about you. About what might have happened if you'd said something. If I'd said something. If either of us had been brave enough. He stops, takes a breath, looks at me directly, and I realized I never stopped. I just got better at pretending. I feel something break open in my chest. Something that's been sealed for so long I'd forgotten it was there. It's not gentle. It's not clean. It's raw and terrifying, and I don't know how to contain it. I stand up, start pacing. I can't sit still. Can't look at him. Julian, I start. But I don't know how to finish. He waits. Patient. Like he's been waiting for 20 years, and a few more minutes won't matter. Finally, I force myself to speak. The words come out broken. Halting. I tell him about the confusion. The shame. The way I felt things I didn't have language for. How I'd lie awake at night in my dorm room, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what was happening inside me. How I'd watch him across the dining hall and feel something in my chest tighten. How I'd invent reasons to be near him, to study together, to drive nowhere just to be in the same car. I tell him how terrified I was. How I grew up in a house where certain things weren't discussed, where normal meant one thing and one thing only. Where any deviation from that script was unthinkable. I tell him about the summer after junior year when I went home and my father made some offhand comment about a neighbor's son who'd come out. The way he said it, the disgust in his voice, and how something inside me just shut down, locked itself away. I tell him I buried it, convinced myself it wasn't real, that it was just intensity, just the closeness of friendship, that if I didn't name it, it would go away. And then I met Elaine. And she was safe. She was what I was supposed to want. And I thought maybe if I built the right life, if I followed the right script, I'd stop feeling this thing I couldn't name. I tell him I used to imagine our lives turning out differently. Late at night when Elaine was asleep and I was lying there in the dark, I'd imagine what would have happened if I'd been braver. If I'd said something. If I'd let myself want what I wanted. But I never had the courage to find out. My voice breaks on the last sentence. I press my palms against my eyes. I'm not crying. Not exactly. But something inside me is splintering. Julian doesn't say anything for a long time. When I finally look at him, his eyes are wet. He says, I knew. I always knew. But I couldn't wait forever. The words land like stones. I nod. Because what else can I do? He's right. He waited. And I ran. And now here we are, 20 years later. Finally having the conversation we should have had when we were 22. He stands, crosses the small space between us. His hand reaches out, fingers brushing against mine. The contact is electric. Immediate. It feels like exhaling after years underwater. For a second, I don't pull away. I let myself feel it. The warmth. The rightness. The way his hand fits against mine like it was always supposed to be there. And then reality crashes back in. My wife, my children, my entire life built on a foundation that suddenly feels like sand. I step back. My hand slips from his. It's too late, I say. My voice sounds hollow. It's too late. My life is already built. Julian doesn't argue. He doesn't try to convince me. He just looks at me with an expression so tender it physically hurts. He says, "Then at least don't lie to yourself anymore." The words cut clean through. I can't stay. I grab my jacket, mumble something about needing to go. He doesn't try to stop me, just watches as I stumble toward the door. As I leave, he says my name. Just once. Nathaniel. I stop, but I don't turn around. He says, "For what it's worth, I'm glad we finally talked." I don't trust myself to respond. I just leave. When I get to my car, I sit in the driver's seat with my hands on the steering wheel, shaking. The streetlights blur through the windshield. I grip the wheel so tightly my knuckles go white. The drive home is a haze. I don't remember half of it. When I get back, the house is dark except for the light in the bedroom. Elaine is asleep, curled on her side, her breathing soft and even. I stand in the doorway, watching her. This woman I've shared my life with for 15 years. This kind, patient woman who deserves so much better than what I've given her. And I realize, with a clarity that makes me nauseous, that I've never truly been present here. Not in the way that matters. I've been a ghost in my own life, going through the motions, playing a part. For the first time, I let myself admit it. Not just to Julian, not just out loud, but to myself. I loved him. I always did. And maybe I still do. I don't sleep that night. I lie there in the dark, listening to Elaine breathe, feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that balcony. Julian's voice, his hand against mine, the weight of everything we finally said. The days that follow are strange, fractured. I go through the motions, work, dinner, homework help, the small machinery of domestic life. But I'm not really there. I'm somewhere else entirely. Elaine notices. Of course she does. The silences between us stretch longer. The easy rhythms we've built over 15 years start to fray. She watches me across the kitchen table with an expression I can't quite read. Concern, maybe. Or sadness. Or something closer to resignation. I tell myself I'll talk to her. That I owe her at least that much. But every time I try to form the words, they die in my throat. A week passes. Then another. Julian texts me once, just checking in, he says, making sure I'm okay. I don't respond. I tell myself it's better this way. Cleaner. That if I just let enough time pass, this feeling will fade. I'll go back to normal. Back to the life I built. But it doesn't fade. It just grows heavier. One evening, I'm sitting in my study, staring at case files I'm not reading, when Elaine appears in the doorway. She's holding 2 glasses of wine. She hands me one and sits down in the chair across from my desk. "We need to talk," she says. The words make my stomach drop. But I nod. Set down my pen. Wait. She takes a sip of wine. Her hand is steady, but I can see the tension in her shoulders. The way she's holding herself together. She says, "Is there someone else?" The question is direct. Simple. And I realize she's been waiting to ask it for a long time. I want to lie. The instinct is so strong it's almost physical. But I'm so tired of lying. To her. To myself. To everyone. So instead, I say there was. A long time ago. She nods slowly. Like she already knew. Like she's been carrying this knowledge for years and just needed me to confirm it. I keep talking. The words come easier now that I've started. I tell her about Julian. About college. About the feelings I never understood and the questions I never asked. I tell her about the letter, the reunion, the conversations that unraveled everything I thought I'd resolved. I tell her I thought I'd moved past it, that I genuinely believed what I felt back then was just confusion, that I could build a good life, a real life, if I just tried hard enough. But I was wrong. My voice cracks. I take a breath, force myself to continue. I tell her I don't think I ever stopped feeling it, that there's been a part of me, all these years, that's been somewhere else. Someone else. And I've tried so hard to be present, to be the husband she deserves, but I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep living like this. Elaine is quiet for a long time. When she finally speaks, her voice is soft. Sad, but not surprised. She says, "I always knew there was a part of you I couldn't reach." The words land like a confession, like she's been carrying this weight too. She tells me she noticed it early on. The way I'd sometimes drift during conversations. The way I'd go quiet when certain topics came up. She tells me she thought maybe it was just how I was built, reserved, private, hard to know. She thought if she was patient enough, gentle enough, I'd eventually let her in. But I never did. Not completely. She says, I kept waiting for you to trust me enough to tell me. But you never did. And eventually, I just stopped asking. I feel something crack in my chest. Because she's right. She's been nothing but patient and kind, and I've given her only half of myself. Maybe less than half. I say I'm sorry. It's inadequate. Pathetic. But it's all I have. She nods. Wipes at her eyes. She's crying now, quietly, and I hate myself for being the cause of it. She asks, do you love him? The question hangs in the air. Direct. Unavoidable. And for the first time, I don't hesitate. I say yes. I think I always have. She nods again. Like that's what she expected. Like she's been preparing for this moment longer than I have. We sit in silence for a while. The clock on the wall ticks. Somewhere in the house, one of the boys is moving around upstairs. The sounds of normal life continuing while ours falls apart. Finally, Elaine says, I can't keep doing this. Living with someone who's only half here. It's not fair to either of us. I know, I say. You're right. She stands, sets down her wine glass, walks to the door, then stops. She says, for what it's worth, I don't hate you. I just wish you'd figured this out before you married me. The words are a knife. Clean and true. After she leaves, I sit alone in my study for hours. The wine goes untouched. The case files remain unread. I just sit there, feeling like I've detonated something I can't put back together. But underneath the guilt and the grief, there's something else. Something that feels almost like relief. The next morning, I wake up early. Elaine is already up, making coffee in the kitchen. We move around each other carefully, like strangers sharing space. The boys come down for breakfast, oblivious to the shift that's happened. We eat in near silence. Then I drive them to school like always. But nothing is like always anymore. That afternoon, I find myself driving to Julian's apartment. I don't plan it. I just get in the car and go. When I get there, I sit in the parking lot for 10 minutes, trying to figure out what I'm going to say. Finally, I just get out and knock on his door. He answers after a moment. He's wearing an old t-shirt and jeans, his hair still wet from a shower. When he sees me, his expression shifts from surprise to concern. Nathaniel, he says, are you okay? I shake my head, because I'm not okay. I haven't been okay in a very long time. He steps aside, lets me in, closes the door behind us. I stand in the middle of his apartment, feeling like I'm vibrating out of my skin. I don't know how to start. Don't know how to explain what I'm doing here. Finally, I just say it. The thing I came here to say. I told her. About you. About everything. Julian goes very still. I told Elaine the truth. He doesn't say anything. Just waits. I tell him about the conversation. About Elaine's question and my answer. About the way everything came apart in the space of a single evening. I tell him I don't know what happens next. That my life is breaking open in ways I can't control. That I'm terrified and lost, and I don't know how to put any of this back together. But I also tell him I'm done lying. Done pretending. Done living half a life because I was too afraid to face the truth. When I finish, Julian is looking at me with an expression I can't quite name. Tenderness. Sadness. Something that might be hope. He crosses the space between us. His hand finds mine. He says, I'm sorry. I never wanted to cause you pain. I know, I say. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I've been running from this for 20 years. We stand there, hands linked, and for the first time in my life, I don't pull away. I just let myself be here. Present. Real. Julian says, what do you need? I don't know, I say. Time, maybe. Space to figure out what my life looks like now. He nods. Squeezes my hand. Whatever you need. I stay for a while longer. We don't talk much. Just sit together on his couch, his shoulder pressed against mine, and I feel something in me start to settle. It's not resolution. Not yet. But it's something like peace. When I finally leave, Julian walks me to the door. He says, I'm leaving soon. The residency ends next week. I know, I say. He says, but I'll be around. If you need me. I nod. Thank you. As I drive home, the sun is setting. The sky is streaked with pink and gold. And despite everything, Despite the wreckage of my marriage, the uncertainty of what comes next, I feel something I haven't felt in years. I feel like myself. For the first time, I'm not running anymore. The days after my conversation with Elaine pass in a blur of logistics and careful distance. We sit down with the boys and tell them we're separating. Not divorcing, not yet. Just taking time apart to figure things out. Michael is angry. He slams his door and doesn't come out for hours. David just gets quiet, retreats into himself the way he always does when things get hard. I move some of my things into a short-term rental across town. A furnished apartment that feels like a hotel room. Temporary, undefined, which is fitting because I don't know what my life is anymore. Elaine is kind about it all, kinder than I deserve. We work out a schedule for the boys, split the bills, divide up the shared calendar of school events and doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences. We're civil, careful, two people trying not to cause more damage than we already have. But underneath it all, there's grief. A mourning for the life we built together, even if it was built on something incomplete. One evening, as I'm packing the last of my books, she comes into the study. She leans against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me. She says, "I hope you find what you're looking for." Her voice isn't bitter, just tired, resigned. I stop packing. Look at her. "I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed." She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, "I'm sorry you couldn't be what you needed." The words settle between us. True and painful. She leaves, and I finish packing in silence. I don't see Julian for a while after that. He texts occasionally, checking in, asking how I'm doing. I respond with brief updates. I'm okay. Still figuring things out. The boys are adjusting. I keep the messages short. Neutral. I need space to think, to process, to understand what my life looks like now that I've dismantled everything I spent 2 decades building. A week passes, then another. The residency must be nearly over by now. One afternoon, I'm sitting in my temporary apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, when my phone rings. It's Julian. I answer. He says, "I'm leaving tomorrow." The words hit harder than I expect. I knew this was coming. The residency was always temporary, but somehow I'd let myself forget. Let myself imagine we had more time. I say tomorrow. Yeah, he sounds tired. The program's over. I have some things back in New York I need to take care of. A few gigs lined up. I nod, even though he can't see me. Right. Of course. There's a pause. Then he says, "I wanted to see you before I go. If that's okay." I close my eyes. Yes, that's okay. We meet at the same cafe where we had our first coffee. Full circle, I suppose. But this time it feels different. Heavier. More final. Julian is already there when I arrive. He looks tired. The kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep can fix. He sees me and stands, and we hug, longer this time, tighter, like we're both trying to memorize the feeling. We sit, order coffee we don't really want. The conversation is halting at first, awkward in a way it hasn't been since that very first meeting. Finally, Julian says, "I'm glad you told her. I'm glad you told the truth." I nod. Me too, even though it's destroying everything. He reaches across the table. His hand covers mine. It's not destroying everything. It's just changing things. There's a difference. I want to believe him. But right now, sitting in my temporary apartment with my life in boxes and my son's angry and confused, it's hard to see the distinction. Julian squeezes my hand. "Then let's go." He leans back in his chair, studying me. He says, "I need to tell you something." I wait. He says, "When I wrote you that letter, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect any of this. I just wanted to see you. To have one conversation. To put some kind of closure on something that's been unfinished for 20 years. I know," I say. He shakes his head. "No, listen. I never wanted to blow up your life. I never wanted to be the reason your marriage fell apart. If I'd known." I cut him off. "This isn't your fault, Julian. This was always there. You just helped me finally see it." He looks at me for a long moment, then nods slowly. We talk for another hour. About everything and nothing. He tells me about the apartment he's subletting in Brooklyn. About the students he'll be working with in the fall. About a composition he's been writing that isn't quite coming together the way he wants. I tell him about the boys. About how Michael is starting to soften, to ask questions instead of just being angry. About how David told me last night that he still loves me, even though he doesn't understand why this is happening. It's the most ordinary conversation, and also the hardest one we've had. Finally, Julian checks his watch. Says he needs to get going. Early flight tomorrow. Still things to pack. We stand. Walk outside together. The sun is low, casting everything in that golden end-of-day light. The air smells like spring turning into summer. Like change. We stop on the sidewalk. Face each other. Julian says, I don't know when I'll be back this way. I know. He says, but I meant what I said. If you need me, I'm around. You have my number. I nod. Thank you. For everything. He smiles. That sad, tender smile that undoes me. I didn't do anything except tell the truth. Sometimes that's everything, I say. We stand there, neither of us quite ready to let go. People move around us on the sidewalk. Cars pass. Life continues its normal rhythms while ours splinters apart. Finally, Julian steps forward, pulls me into one last hug. This one lasts longer than it should. His hand comes up to the back of my head, fingers tangling briefly in my hair. I close my eyes, breathe him in, try to memorize this feeling. When we finally pull apart, his eyes are wet. He says, take care of yourself, Nathaniel. You too. He turns, walks away. I watch him go, hands in my pockets, until he disappears around the corner. And then he's gone. I stand there for a long time after, watching the empty street, feeling the weight of his absence settle over me. Eventually, I walk back to my car, sit in the driver's seat with my hands on the steering wheel. The same position I was in all those weeks ago outside the train station, when this all began. But I'm different now. Everything is different now. I drive to my apartment, the temporary one that doesn't feel like home. I walk inside and stand in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxes I haven't unpacked. Evidence of a life in transition. A life falling apart or coming together, depending on how you look at it. I sit on the couch, pick up my phone, open my messages. Julian's last text is still there. I'm leaving tomorrow. I start to type. Delete it. Type again. Delete again. Finally, I just write. Thank you for coming back. I needed this. I hit send before I can overthink it. His response comes a few minutes later. Me too. Be well. I set the phone down, lean back, stare at the ceiling, and I realize something. The ache is still there. The loss. The grief for what might have been. But underneath it, there's something else. Something that feels almost like clarity. Julian left. He had to. His life is elsewhere. And maybe that's how it was always going to be. Maybe we weren't meant to have a future together. Maybe we were just meant to have this one final, honest conversation that forced me to look at who I really am. For the first time in my life, I told the truth. Not just to Julian, not just to Elaine, but to myself. And that has to be worth something. Even if it means he's gone. Even if it means I'm alone now in this half-empty apartment with no clear sense of what comes next. At least I'm not lying anymore. At least I'm finally living like myself. I close my eyes, breathe, and for once, I don't fight the feeling. I just let it be. Months pass. Summer fades into fall. The temporary apartment becomes less temporary. I unpack the boxes, hang pictures on the walls, buy furniture that's actually mine. Slowly, the space starts to feel like something that belongs to me. Life rearranges itself in quieter ways than I expected. The boys stay with me every other week. We establish new routines, different from the old ones, but ours. Michael softens gradually, asks me questions about why I left, why I couldn't just stay and keep pretending. I tell him the truth as gently as I can. That pretending wasn't fair to anyone. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is be honest, even when it hurts. David doesn't ask as many questions, but he hugs me longer now when I drop him back at the house. Like he understands something he can't quite put into words yet. Elaine and I finalize the divorce in October. We meet at a lawyer's office, sign papers, divide what's left to divide. Afterward, we have coffee. Just the two of us. No lawyers. No agenda. She tells me she started seeing someone. A colleague from work. Nothing serious yet, but something that feels promising. She looks lighter when she talks about it. More herself. I'm happy for her. And I mean it. She asks if I'm seeing anyone. I shake my head. Not ready yet. Still figuring out who I am outside of everything I used to be. She nods. Understands. Then she says something I don't expect. She says, I hope you find him again someday. Julian, I hope you get a chance to see where it goes. The words surprise me. I look at her, this woman I spent 15 years with, and I see something like forgiveness in her eyes. Thank you, I say. That means more than you know. We part as friends. Not close ones, maybe, but not enemies. Just two people who tried their best and fell short, and are learning to be okay with that. I think about Julian sometimes. More than sometimes. I wonder where he is, what he's doing. If he thinks about me too. I don't reach out. I tell myself it's because I need time. Because I'm still rebuilding. Because I don't want to pull him into something half-formed. But the truth is simpler than that. I'm afraid. Afraid that what we had was just a moment. A catalyst. That the feelings I have for him were more about what he represented, freedom, honesty, the road not taken, than about him specifically. Or maybe I'm afraid of the opposite. That what I feel is real and enduring, and I've already lost my chance. So I don't reach out. I just think about him. And try to build a life that would be worth sharing with someone. If that someone ever came back around. One weekend in November, I drive to the coast. It's something I've been doing lately. These solitary drives to the ocean. There's something about the water that helps me think. The vastness of it. The way it just keeps moving, indifferent to everything happening on shore. I find myself in a small town I've never been to before. Just a strip of shops and restaurants along the waterfront. The kind of place that probably swells in summer and empties out in winter. I park and walk along the beach. The air is cold, sharp with salt. The waves roll in steady and endless. A few other people are scattered along the sand, dog walkers, joggers, someone flying a kite in the distance. I walk until my fingers go numb, then head back toward town looking for somewhere warm. There's a small cafe near the water, the kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. I go inside, order coffee, find a seat by the window, and that's when I hear it. Piano music, soft and familiar, filtering through the cafe speakers. It's one of those jazz standards Julian used to play, the melody winding through the air like smoke. For a moment, I'm transported. Back to his dorm room. Back to that balcony overlooking the city. Back to every moment we shared and every moment we didn't. I close my eyes. Listen. Let the music wash over me. When I open them again, I'm smiling. Not sad. Not grieving. Just smiling. Because I realize something in that moment. Julian doesn't need to be here for what he gave me to matter. He helped me see who I really am. Helped me stop running. Helped me choose honesty over comfort. And that gift doesn't expire just because he's not in the room anymore. Maybe we'll find each other again someday. Maybe we won't. Maybe what we had was meant to be exactly what it was, a doorway, not a destination. I can live with that. I finish my coffee, step back outside into the cold. The sun is starting to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The water reflects it all back, doubling the beauty. I walk down to the edge of the shore, let the waves lap at my shoes, reach into my pocket and pull out my wedding ring. I've been carrying it for months now, not quite ready to let it go. But standing here, watching the tide come in, I realize it's time. I turn the ring over in my fingers one last time. Think about everything it represented. The life I tried to build. The person I tried to be. The love I gave, even if it was incomplete. Then I slip it off and set it down on a piece of driftwood nearby. Not thrown into the ocean. Not discarded. Just set down. Left behind. I turn and walk back toward my car. The air is crisp and clean. My breath makes clouds in the cold. And for the first time in as long as I can remember, I'm not carrying weight I don't need. I drive home as the sun disappears below the horizon. The sky darkens. Stars begin to appear, one by one, like promises. When I get back to my apartment, I sit on the couch and pull out my phone. Open my messages. Julian's last text is still there from months ago. Be well. I think about writing to him, telling him about the beach, about the ring, about how I'm finally learning to breathe. But I don't. Not yet. Instead, I just sit there in the quiet. In this life that's mine now. unfinished and uncertain and more honest than anything I've ever known. And somewhere out there, I believe Julian is breathing easier too, living his life, playing his music, being exactly who he's always been. Maybe our paths will cross again. Maybe they won't. But for now, this is enough. I'm enough. For the first time in my life, I believe that.